welcome back to Limabean Living. If you guys are new here, my name is Emily. This is my motherhood channel where I take care of all things mom. I have a super small homestead on my Southern California property, but you gotta start somewhere. We do have chickens and they are producing eggs like crazy, faster than we can consume them, and I'm hoping to freeze dry a bunch of eggs today. So I'm gonna walk you through that process, show you how we freeze dry them, and then at the end of this video, I may even show you guys reconstituting the eggs and different ways that you can use the egg powder that's created in this process. So one of the reasons I have so many eggs is a majority of our chickens are not molting this fall. We raised a lot of them from babies in the spring, and they don't go through their first molt until at least like 18 months of age, and most of our chickens are not that old yet. We do have some chickens though that are a little bit older and are going through the molting process, some for the first time, so it's been an experience being able to see that happen. And during that process, usually they don't lay eggs. We have been getting some eggs from our molting hens, but they sometimes have soft shells, or you can just tell something's a little off, and that's because their body is putting most of their energy into making those new feathers. Before we get to preparing these eggs, let's go on outside and check out one of our molting chickens. So these black and white hens, you can clearly see a difference between this bird, which hasn't lost a lot of feathers, and this one who has. You can see a bunch of those pin feathers. And unfortunately, it's, a painful experience for them to grow back their feathers, but you can see really clearly a lot of them wanting to come in. Now, feathers are mostly protein, so this little birdie will need to eat a lot of bugs and, grub and stuff to help with that feather growth. And hopefully she will be looking good as new in hopefully a couple weeks, but it could take a really long time depending on the birds. Chocolate here is also going through a molt, but it doesn't look as extreme, but you can see all the little baby feathers on her wing kind of coming in, but a lot of those new feathers are looking really good. So next fall, pretty much all of our hens will go through that molting stage, and we probably won't get this mass production of eggs. So one way that I'm trying to prepare for that is by freeze drying these eggs. And what we're gonna be doing today is scrambling them up in my blender and transferring them to our freeze dryer on 5 different trays. I have a medium Harvest Right freeze dryer. And we're gonna let the freeze dryer freeze dry these eggs, get all that water content out of the eggs, leaving just a dry egg powder at the end. And that dry egg powder will be good for up to 20-25 years when stored correctly. And so by doing this, I will have eggs ready for me to scramble up or use in baking in the fall next year, when possibly I get only 1 egg a day or no eggs, depending on my chickens. But before we get to blending these up, we gotta go prep our freeze dryer. So let's go ahead and head into my laundry room and check that out. So the very first thing I need to do is turn on my machine, which is way in the back there, and we will see the little screen turn on in just a second. And while that's getting started, let me go ahead and show you my charts. So I have a little, not professional or not really super organized log of everything that I have freeze dried, and this helps me, keep notes of, if I need to do something better a different time. But I had a successful batch of doing eggs a long time ago, and these are the settings that I chose. So I'm gonna keep these settings, and I think I'm gonna up the eggs because we have so many to about 18 per tray. And then that will also help me packaging them because I tend to package 18 eggs at a time. But here I also noted how much the trays weighed in grams, and I really wanted them to be consistent so that I knew that it was fully, done drying. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and punch in these settings into my freeze dryer because they worked out for me well the last time, and I hope to have the same results this time. So I don't know why it's still showing that. My husband changed the oil yesterday. It might register, but I'm just gonna double check that I'm in the right mode. A mode is usually for candy, so I'm in B mode. If I wanted to change it, I would just touch that a couple times until it showed A. But I'm gonna go ahead and customize just to make sure that all the settings are what I wanted. So now the freeze dryer is cooling down. It's starting to develop ice on that little barrel on the inside, and it's getting ready to then freeze these eggs to -20 degrees is the setting that I chose. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna crack 18 eggs into my blender and then blend that up, and we'll pour it into our tray that I will be loading into the freeze dryer. You can pour it into your tray on your counter and then carefully carry it over to your freeze dryer, but this way of pouring the eggs into a tray that's already in the freeze dryer will hopefully eliminate any possible mess. Now, to avoid spoiling the whole batch, I will be cracking these eggs into a cup first and then transferring it just in case there's any bad eggs in this bunch. I really don't think there will be, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. So because I want to do 18 eggs per tray, I'm just going to crack 18 eggs in my blender, blend that up, transfer it to the tray in the freeze dryer, and then repeat that process 4 more times. One other thing that if you are a chicken owner or maybe not, maybe you don't own any chickens, but you need calcium for your compost or your garden, obviously we'll be getting a lot of shells after this. I tend to keep my shells, bake them in the oven for like 20-30 minutes till they're nice and crispy, and I crack them up and actually feed them back to my chickens as a source of calcium. But again, you can use it in your garden as well. So I will be saving most of my shells, and I'll probably need at least 1 or 2 more trays because we are doing so many eggs today.
You do not have to be good. Even the best of us have been misunderstood. So get up onto your feet. The sun is shining, repentance through the leaf. Its rays will wash you clean. I'm walking slowly, I'm taking my time. All I like good talking is starting to rhyme. Letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
So you can see that it's pretty full with 18 eggs. I wouldn't do any more than 18. And if you just load it like right into the freeze dryer this way, it makes it a lot easier. I wouldn't feel comfortable carrying any of these trays full of liquid from my kitchen to my freeze dryer. So if you're doing something where the trays are already prepared, it obviously wouldn't be taking this long to get them all in. But after 15 minutes, this screen comes up to load the trays in the freeze dryer. And then we also need to close the drain valve so that it can have a good vacuum. Then we're just gonna close this door, turn it all the way until it's locked in place. And then we just hit continue. And it will freeze these eggs to like -20 degrees, and then we'll check in a little bit. Now, if you are new to freeze drying, you might be a little concerned, like, do I need to come back and do I need to press any buttons to change it from freezing to drying or any of that? You actually don't. That was a concern of mine at the beginning. I really didn't see any videos that talked about it. It was just kind of like, you set it up and go. And then I was like, but wait, is there something I need to do in the meantime? So your biggest contribution is actually before you even load any of the trays when you're choosing your settings. So you saw the settings that I chose. You can choose -10 degrees, you can choose 0 degrees, you can alternate how much time you want it to freeze, if there's like extra freeze time. I believe, if my memory is serving me correctly, I did 2 hours because this is really liquidy. I want to make sure that it's completely frozen solid. There are sensors in the machine that will sense when the food is totally frozen, and it will then kick into that extra freeze time just to be safe. Like, I chose some extra time there. And then after that time has elapsed, the machine will sense it and turn into like vacuum mode, vacuum freezing. And then I think after that, it starts heating it up, and that does the freeze drying. But the machine has the sensors and it senses the food. Now, obviously, if you choose settings that maybe aren't ideal for the food you're putting in, you may not get a good final product. And that goes for candies and other foods that you do as well, not just eggs. So when you're just starting off, maybe you can hopefully use a video like mine or someone else that helps you determine if the settings that you're choosing for the foods you're choosing are the ideal settings. But that really is all that you have to do. The machine will then go through the different cycles as it senses it, and it will finish after that extended dry time. The standard dry time is like 2 hours. I chose 12 just to be safe, but the standard is 2 hours. While we're talking about, that extended dry time, some people choose 12 or more hours so that they can go to bed at night, and if the machine were to technically finish the drying, they would wake up and it would be in that extended dry time, and they wouldn't feel like their food might go bad in the machine. But from my understanding, after doing some of my research, the machine, even if it finishes 6 hours before you're gonna wake up and see the final product, it will refreeze the food and essentially keep it still good, even though the drying process has finished a long time ago. So from my understanding, all you would have to do maybe is warm the trays so that it's easy, to touch and pull out the food. But having the machine finish in the middle of the night, it will just, refreeze anything and keep it good until you're ready to work with it. But some people don't trust that, and they just say, I'm gonna have this, dry an extra 12 hours so I can come and stop it when I'm ready. But we will talk more about the final stages of the freeze drying process a little later. I will check in at a different stage, maybe when it's vacuum freezing, just to kind of show you that the machine's still doing what it does without any intervention from me. So after waking up this morning, this is what I woke up to. The machine switched from freezing to vacuum freezing to drying now. You can definitely see there's no more condensation on the door, but there's still this ice around the rim is the moisture getting pulled from the eggs and sticking to the walls. And you can kind of see it's looking a little bit more like it can be crumbled up. So again, I haven't touched that machine at all since loading them and pressing start. It's gone through each step on its own, sensing the foods. And this is the standard drying phase. So obviously it's been drying for a while and it still has a ways to go, plus the additional 12 hours that I set. So after it finishes sensing that everything's dry, typically it gives it 2 more hours. I chose 12. So it'll do all of that by itself, and then the only time I have to touch something is when it's fully complete. So I will check back in again later just to show you guys the progress. Okay, so this is the current state of the drying process. It still hasn't even touched into the extra dry time. You can see that there's a big thick rim of ice, and it's kind of encroaching on my bottom tray there. If it gets really bad, from what I understand, I stop the cycle, put these trays in the freezer, and then defrost the machine and then start the process all over again, just so that there isn't too much ice buildup on the wall. But we are gonna see if it needs that in a little bit. Okay, so shortly after I checked on this last, it probably switched from just drying to extra dry time, where I set that for 12 hours. And it shows that I only have about 3 hours left. So this has been extra drying, so it's sensed that it's done, but it's been extra drying for about 9 hours. I'm actually going to be leaving my house for a little bit, longer than a 3-hour period. So this is a good time to weigh these trays, put them back in, keep the system going, and then when I get home, I will weigh them again to see if they've dropped in weight or stayed the same. If they have dropped in weight, that means that there's still water that's getting pulled from the scrambled egg. But if they stay the same, that means that most of the moisture pretty much has been pulled out, and then I can let it run one more time just to be safe, and then I will show you guys how I, package these all up and save them. But let's go ahead and weigh these trays before I get going. So I haven't risked pressing cancel and figuring out like what that does, but what I tend to do, just to be safe, because this is what's worked for me, you probably can just hit cancel, but I press it like that until it goes to 0, and then this is the end screen that shows up. I can now open the drain valve and let all the air back in. You want to make sure it's not in any moisture, because that will be bad for your food inside. And then I'll weigh each tray and then put them back in, close the drain valve, and click on more dry time. But if I was let's say happy with what they were doing, I could just hit defrost so that all of the ice in the machine there defrosts and drains out of the machine. Or I can hit no defrost and maybe start a new cycle. But for now, we are just going to weigh our trays. You can see here that the seal is getting smaller and smaller. So now I'll be able to turn this and actually open it up. All right, so I have my food scales on, and then I have my little, way I document everything. I have this for top, middle, lower, and lower, and I'll just be writing their weights as I check them over the course of the next few hours, just to make sure that they are completely dry. So this is what it looks like right now. To me, this does look done, but I would rather be safe than sorry. And then I just try to center this on the tray, and 837. Okay, so then we're just gonna hit more dry time. And it reminds you in case you forgot to close the drain valve. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Nice and closed. Then you just hit continue. And it automatically sets it to dry for an additional 2 hours. But I'm gonna be gone for like at least 6 hours, so I'm just gonna let it dry the entire time. So I will check back again when we get home. I will weigh these trays again. Hopefully they will have stayed the same weight in 6 hours, meaning that they are completely dry and there's no more, left to do in the freeze dryer. But we will obviously see if that's the case a little bit later. So I'll check back in soon. Okay, so we just got home. This is what I came home to. Pretty much looks the same. So we're gonna weigh these and see if they weigh any different. I adjusted it, 837. It's probably okay, but I might have these go 2 more hours and weigh it again just to be safe. Okay, so for the most part, everything has checked out. There is a tray that did go down, and I tried, shifting it around to see if that changed, because sometimes doing that will change it by a gram because my scale is small and the trays are big. But since it takes a little while to process these anyways, I am going to leave in like 2 of these trays and just do like another run for about an hour, hour and a half, and I'm going to process the other ones that checked out. Okay, we have our raw eggs here. I'm gonna transfer just 1 tray with a spatula into my food processor and just blend it up into a fine powder. And then I'm going to place those eggs into a little Mylar bag that was given to me by Harvest Right. And once the 2 bags are prepared, I'm gonna pop open this vacuum sealed thing of oxygen absorbers and throw one in, and then vacuum seal it again so that the other ones stay good until I package the remaining eggs. So now that I have all the trays out, I'm gonna go ahead and close the door. I am done freeze drying stuff right now, so I am gonna go and hit defrost. And sometimes it takes a while for this to actually like change screens, even though it made the little sound that I did push the button. And then I'm gonna up the time just because there was a lot of ice. And I'm gonna hit continue. I can add more as this is going, but it says keep the door closed. And I'm gonna make sure this tube goes in our little bucket, and all of the water that was collected from the eggs will drain into there. And obviously we want this to still stay open, and the liquid will drain, out of the machine through the tube into the little collection bucket. My defrost is complete. Open this up. You can see that there's no more ice in this barrel. And what we're actually gonna do, because we did raw eggs, I'm gonna have my husband remove this rubber like seal, take out the trays, and I'm gonna give them a good wash. And I'm gonna wash, with just some warm water and some like Dawn soap inside the barrel, just to make that it is nice and clean for whatever I choose to do next. You can see that that's still open, and it actually collected a whole lot of water from those eggs. So I'm not going to get to cleaning it right now in this video, but that is what I will be doing. I am going to just leave it slightly open so that there's some airflow, so that if there is a little bit of moisture, I don't have an issue caused by that. And then when you go ahead and click done after the defrost, you get back to your home screen. And obviously, if there was still ice, you could go ahead and click defrost and add more time. But for now, I'm done, so I'm just gonna turn off my machine. So it's a new day, and it is now time to reconstitute some of our freeze-dried eggs. I'm actually not gonna be using the ones I just did. I actually made a batch on July 24th, 2024. I'm gonna open this up. It still feels inside the bag nice and powdery. I don't think that there was any moisture left in here, but I figured I would give this a try because it is the oldest batch of raw eggs that I have prepped. And although this isn't, 20 years old, it is the oldest one, and we can go ahead and see if it still tastes just like fresh eggs. Now, to reconstitute the raw eggs, you need 2 tablespoons of the egg powder and 2 tablespoons of water. So if you really don't care the exact amount of eggs that you're eating and you just want to kind of eyeball it, you could just do equal parts. Now, there are 4 tablespoons in 1/4 of a cup, so that means 1/4 of a cup is equivalent to 2 eggs. So I want to do about 4 eggs because it'll be for me and the kids. So I'm going to use 1/2 cup of egg powder and 1/2 cup of water, and that will be equivalent to about 4 eggs. So since I'm not using the whole 18 eggs, I do have a little mason jar that I will be storing the remaining egg powder in. And I have a little vacuum sealer that can seal this and keep it nice and fresh. But let's go ahead and open this up. Hopefully everything turns out okay. All right, we got our egg powder in here. It looks like it did when I freeze dried it, so that's a good sign. Okay, so we got our 1/2 cup of egg powder. And I'm just gonna fill this same thing up with some water. Got our water. And in the egg powder it goes. I'm just gonna give this a little mix and let it sit for maybe like a minute just to let all the little granules reconstitute. While the egg is reconstituting, what I will be doing is vacuum sealing my jar, and there is an oxygen absorber still in there. It was mixed in with the bag. But one thing I did notice that was when I pop open these vacuum sealed jars that have powdery substances, they tend to come out and escape. So in an effort to try and minimize that, I'm gonna be putting in this little cupcake liner and then vacuum sealing it to help prevent any future mess. So while I'm waiting, I figured I'd also share one other thing, is that I usually cook my eggs scrambled. Obviously, I can't do sunny side up eggs. I've never tried separating the whites and yolks and freeze drying it. Probably, I don't even think that might work because of the fat content in the yolks, I believe. It probably wouldn't freeze dry as well, so that's why you have to blend it up before freeze drying. So if you want just, cooked eggs, you gotta be happy with scrambled. But this also works well in baking, apparently. I haven't tried it yet, but you can apparently put the water with the wet ingredients, the egg powder and the dry ingredients, and your baked goods should still end up perfectly normal. So that is maybe something I'll try in the future if necessary, but I thought at least I would give you the scrambled eggs and show what they look like when they're reconstituted, when they're cooked, and how they taste. So this is what the eggs look like. They've been sitting for a minute or two. And I'm just heating up some oil, and we're gonna be cooking these in just a second. Okay, here goes nothing. So here we go. Now, I'm not gonna lie, that, reconstituted mixture did look a little thicker than I was anticipating. I had reconstituted the smallest tiny little bit of scraps at one point a long time ago when I was scraping my pans and transferring the egg powder to my Mylar bags. And when I reconstituted that, it cooked up. It looked exactly like, fresh eggs cooked up. This looked a little bit more I don't know, just thicker. I don't know. And maybe that could mean that I needed to add a little bit more water. Maybe I'd put, maybe the egg powder was just a little bit over my measuring cup, but I think it was fairly equal in measurement. So we're gonna give this a taste try, see how this goes. But overall, the final result looks like normal cooked eggs. The one thing is that the yolks and the whites probably were more blended up together when I freeze dried them than how I normally kind of scramble them up when I'm making them fresh. So there's not little white pieces and darker yellow pieces. It's just kind of all the same. So that kind of looks odd to me because it was actually fully scrambled up. But enough chit chat. I'm gonna try one little piece. I didn't put any salt on it, so the only additional flavor would be the oil that I added to my pan, but that will, you know, I'll be able to tell if this tastes like really different than what I'm used to versus, you know, the same. But we got my little piece here. Texture-wise, seems pretty consistent. I forgot to add salt while I was cooking, so let me add some salt to these. Okay, so here's a bigger piece. Overall, I think it's pretty comparable, and you know, in an emergency in life, if I needed to break into these and scramble them up, they would totally, you know, work for our family. I am excited to use the egg powder in baking. I think it would make it easier and like probably even less messy than having to crack open a bunch of eggs depending on the recipe that you're making. Obviously, you can't use it in baking where you have to separate the egg whites and the yolks. So that is probably one downside, but you know, most things don't require the separation, and I think in that case it would work out fine. So my kids like cheesy eggs. I'm gonna add some cheese to the tops of the rest of the eggs and feed it to my kids and see if they say anything, if they notice any difference, and that will kind of be the tell because kids don't hold back. So let's go ahead and see if they can tell a difference. So there you go, we scrambled up and tried the freeze-dried eggs I made in July. I do kind of think it was weird like how it looked when I reconstituted it. So I might try reconstituting a little bit more and giving the scrambled eggs that I make to our chickens that are molting who need the extra protein. And you know, that way I can just see maybe I just needed to add more water and it was my fault. So like I hinted at earlier, I did end up using the egg powder to bake with a few days later. I really wanted just to make some cake pops, so I figured I would make a yellow box cake and follow all the instructions. So I measured out the right amount of egg powder I needed to, you know, for the equivalent amount of eggs. Then I added in the recipe's amount of oil and water, and then I added in a little bit of extra water based on how much egg powder I needed to put in here. And then I blended that all up, transferred it to a greased pan and baked it, and the cake came out perfectly. I really couldn't notice any difference from, you know, when I've made box cakes in the past versus this. It was still hot when I cut into it, and I ended up blending it up to make some cake pops. On a different day, I also tried using the egg powder to make French toast. I did add in a little bit too much milk. It just kind of poured out too quickly. But I did some egg powder, water, some milk. I probably actually could have skipped out on the water and just added milk to reconstitute the eggs, but it is what it is. Put some cinnamon in there, and then I had some sourdough sandwich bread I needed to use up. So I just dipped that in my egg powder milk solution and fried that up, and it ended up working out really great. That first flip, wasn't sure if it was done yet, but anyways, my French toast turned out great. I have noticed that if I want to make scrambled eggs, I like to mix some fresh eggs with some egg powder to get the consistency feeling like 100% normal. Sometimes with the egg powder, it seems a little bit more like dense. I really don't know how to describe it. It's very subtly different, but if I want it to resemble scrambled eggs even more like normal fresh eggs, I add in 1 or 2 fresh eggs to the mixture. But that wraps up today's video. I hope you guys found it informative and entertaining. If you guys never plan on getting a freeze dryer, at least you can appreciate how it can be used. If you guys like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. And if you are new to my channel, I do all things mom here. I would love it if you stick around and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Woohoo! You've made it to the end of the video. If you didn't know already, every Monday and Friday, you can find motherhood and lifestyle content on this channel. And since us moms have to do it all, that may mean yummy recipes, easy DIYs, mom hacks, cleaning and organization, or just a combo of everything. Please know that you are loved and you are made for greatness, and I will catch you in the next one.